Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I'm back with a new installment of my complete run of the Warlord. Now, last time I did issues 1 through 34, and I stopped at 34 because I couldn't find issue 35. So recently, I went to a couple of comic stores. I was like, you know what, I'm going to buy a new 35. I bought a new 35, got home, and when I opened up my boxes to file things away, I immediately found the missing copy of 35 that I already had. But it's not all lost. It's only $3, and actually the new one that I got is in much nicer condition than the old one. So whatever, it's fine. Now, before I jump into this, I'm going to be covering issues 35 to 71 today. 35 was almost a really good stopping point. 37 actually would have been what I would have chosen if I had been able to choose a stopping point. That's because with a lot of long-running books, but this one in particular, since there's only a couple creative teams that do the entire series, there's certain eras of the book where you can look back and you can kind of lump things together. So with Warlord, you have sort of the first 14 issues setting everything up, getting all the characters in place. Issue 15 starts the big storyline where it introduces Warlord's son, Joshua. That runs for several issues, and then when Joshua apparently dies in issues 21, Warlord is sort of bereft and grief-stricken, and so he leaves to just wander around aimlessly, getting into trouble to sort of bury his feelings in fighting. And that period lasts until issue 37 or so. And so the book is also kind of aimless during this time. There's no broader things going on. You do get some background stuff. There's some stuff being set up here and there. Issue 30 in particular, we see more with Josh, and we see that there's a war brewing and stuff like that, which will come into play here in these issues. But for the most part, it's just sort of introducing new characters and just standalone stories. That changes with issue 38. So, I'll get into that as I get to it, but I just wanted to sort of set that up here because these last few issues are sort of just tying things up. So here's 35, and what's interesting about 35, the reason it wasn't in my collection to begin with is because I had taken it out to do a separate video about it, which I don't think ever was published. But basically, issue 35 is a standalone story where Warlord gets into, Travis gets into some increasingly bizarre situations and fights, and you basically find out that there are some other characters that are playing basically Dungeons and Dragons, and Warlord is one of their characters. So it's a very meta, sort of one-off humorous thing. Now, those characters will show up later in the run again, but it's just sort of a nod to the popularity of D&D and role-playing games and stuff from this time period. So it's a fun little issue. Not a lot of consequence to it. 36, I just love Grell's art. It just has some great covers. We can see Demos again, who's already died, I think, twice at this point. Up here in the background, he is coming back. Demos is coming back again. Here's a great Grell cover. He does a lot of these. He's very ahead of his time in terms of the covers. These days, you get a lot of covers on comics where it doesn't really show what's happening in the book. It's just sort of like a pinup thing. Grell was doing that a lot back, in 1980. And here's one where it's Shakira, which is the cat lady here. She had made her first appearance just a little bit before this. But just a really cool cover. You will notice up here we start getting a backup story, okay? Beginning in this issue, 8 new pages starring Omak. Yes, it's Omak. So I don't know exactly what the thought process was of having Omak as the backup here, but Omak is going to remain the backup for a while. And so you do get an interesting mix where the main story is fantasy, the backup story is science fiction. I guess I can see it. 38, very important issue. Key issue in the run. Starts to set up things that are about to happen in a couple different ways. The woman on the cover here is Travis Morgan's daughter, Jennifer. So this is her first appearance of Jennifer Morgan. Jennifer shows up. She's looking for her father, basically so she can tell him what a dick he is, because he's a terrible father, and he basically ran off to join the military when she was just a little girl and abandoned all his fatherly duties. And she spent a lot of time and a lot of money and gotten a lot of people killed making her way to Skartaris so she can just tell him what a loser he is. And they sort of reconcile by the end. The other thing that's important in this issue is we get the return of Aton. Now, this is a character that had appeared just briefly a long time ago, who is like sort of like a kid at the time, and Warlord, in one of his things where he's inspiring people with, the promise of America, basically. He told him to go out and tell everyone the message of freedom and hope, and so Aton's been actually doing that much more effectively than Warlord himself has been doing it. He shows up again here, and he's sort of, he's older, and he's sort of like, I've been your avatar out there spreading your message, and now the people are ready to fight for freedom, and that's going to come into play in a couple issues. So this is a little bit of a turning point issue here. 39. There's a period of time here for a little while where Warlord is riding a Pegasus. I don't really remember why, but there's a few issues here where he has a Pegasus. Things really start kicking into play here with issue 40. So we get a few things happening here. We get the first appearance of another new character, or rather, I should say the return of a character. So technically not the first appearance, but back in issue 25, we had the first appearance of what seemed to be a one-off character, a guy by the name of Ashir, who was a prince who didn't want to have the responsibility, so he ran off to be a thief. In this issue, he comes back, and he becomes kind of an important recurring character in the series. And we also start getting some more stuff with Jennifer. So over the course of these issues here, we get this story going on in the background where excuse me, Demos has once again been brought back to life. There's like this one loyal servant who manages to somehow save him, and he's absolutely hideous. There's this great design that Grell has where it's Demos's head, and instead of a neck, there's just a hand. And so it's a head that crawls around like this on a hand, and he's trying to get his body back, right? And this is going to be going on through the background and building through from issues 40 up to 50. Everything builds up to this giant conclusion in issue 50. And there's also this war that started that's going on that's going to involve Ashir's people and Aton and the various forces that we saw in issue 30. So everything's sort of building up, and it's really right around here, 38, 39, 40, where those pieces start to come together and we start getting this big build towards issue 50. So here's 41. We see Tara's back. And Grell has a thing where he doesn't think there's any narrative excitement in happy couples. So he'll frequently have his couples come together for a while, and then something happens and they split up for a while. So, of course, Warlord's been gone for quite a while after the death of his son. Back with Tara here. We're going to see them together, and they'll split up again a few times over the course of the series. 42. Okay, the war is in full flight here. Great cover from Grell. I said this last time, but I think Warlord, for me, consistently, like, if you just look at the covers, it's really helped by the fact that Grell does such great covers, but it has some of the best, or maybe the best, most consistently great covers through the entire series. Some great stuff here from Grell. Another cool cover, Warlord going berserk. More fighting, more war. This is issue 43. 44, a very Grell cover, different representations of the main characters. You see a lot of covers like this from Grell on John Sable, for instance. Here's another cover that I absolutely love, 45, is Nightmare. He's traded in his Pegasus for this black unicorn thing. Love the use of the colors on here. I'm a sucker for yellow covers. Contrast with the black horse. It just looks so cool. 46. Omak still going on in the background here. 47, we get a story with some werewolves. This is going to come back around. There's going to be a whole nother storyline with this guy. One of my favorites coming up in a little while. Again, just love the covers. 48. Here's a minor key for you. It's the first appearance, not in Warlord, but this is one of these ones where they have those 16-page preview comics inside. This is the first appearance of Arak, Son of Thunder, and this story predates Arak #1. It's sort of a preview to get you hyped for Arak. So this is a special, extra giant-sized issue. Everything's really building towards this climax now at this point. 49, unexpectedly, we have the return of Claw, the Unconquered. Guessing this was to tie up some of the loose ends from the cancellation of Claw's series a few issues earlier. And at this point, they don't have a steady backup anymore because Omak, I think, is over for good here. Yeah, we're going to see a couple new backups later. And then 50, issue 50. So this is a tremendous cover. Absolutely awesome Grell cover. A lot of really important things happen in this issue. Most importantly, we once again get the death of Deimos. Now, Deimos, after this issue, he will show up again a couple times, and he'll show up again decades later. But this is essentially the end of Deimos as sort of the main bad guy in the series. This is the third time that he's been killed off in this run, and they finally sort of move on from that. The war ends. Aton gets killed by Deimos. He's been a major sort of supporting character since he returned in issue 38. And Travis Morgan rescues his daughter Jennifer, and a lot of stuff's going to happen with Jennifer very shortly, because the series is about to take a massive turn, although the readers at the time didn't know it, because this is also essentially the last issue of Grell's run. So this is about on par for Grell. John Sable freelance, he wrote for 57 issues before dropping that title. And but the creative juices really, you could see that he sort of told the story he wanted to tell by about issue 40. Here he gets to issue 50 and he's basically done with it. For my money, if you read his Green Arrow series, which I absolutely love, the main narrative propulsion in that series also ends around issue 50, and then it sort of meanders for a while after that. Not that there aren't good stories, but 50 is basically the last issue of Grell. He's still doing the covers, and he's still listed as writer in the credits, but I'm going to get to that in a second. 51, love this cover. It's very Grell. He likes the circles and stuff. But just, again, another classic. Doesn't matter what the story is inside. It's just sort of a pin-up of the character. In this case, this issue is reprinting. It says it's reprinting Warlord #1, which is a little bit of an odd choice, considering that Warlord #1 is the second issue of the series, because it started in first issue special #8. But here's the reprint issue, and the reason they're doing this is because there's actually a new creative team starting with the next issue. Well, I say the next issue. Grell still draws 52. It's just sort of a one-off that could have been slotted in anywhere. I'm not saying he did it as a fill-in, but with 53, we get a new artist, Mark Teixeira, and Grell is still listed as the writer. However, we find out much later in the letter columns of the series, a couple years later, that these issues were actually not written by Grell. They were ghost-written by Mike Grell's wife at the time, his then-wife, Sharon Grell. And it sort of picks up sort of mid-series, because in the previous issue, Warlord had traveled back to our world and ended up in the Soviet Union. It picks up with that. But the change in tone is let me try to say that again, is evident right away, because Jennifer Morgan suddenly becomes a totally different character. She starts training as a wizard. It turns out that she has a bunch of untapped potential as a wizard. Her hair's turned white as a result of, I don't know what, her trauma with Demos or the wizardiness of it all. And so Jennifer Morgan turns into essentially an entirely different character starting with this issue, and becomes a major character in the series. And we get Mark Teixeira on pencils. His is very early on in his career, so he doesn't have that sort of style that you associate with Teixeira yet, but it's very solid stuff. And controversial. I've said this a number of times before. People sometimes think I'm crazy, but this era, where it's being ghostwritten by Sharon Grell, with the art from Teixeira, is actually my favorite run in the whole series. I like these issues better than the first 50 that were written and drawn by Grell. I love Grell's art, and I'm a big fan of his writing as well, but I like the writing here actually better. Because it's less episodic. There's a lot of bigger arcs. Things build off of each other. Here we get the rest of Jennifer's wizard origin story. And then with 55, we start what I think is really Sharon Grell's first big arc. And you can see I have it signed by Mark Teixeira. He also drew a side shot of Travis Morgan. I'll show you 56. This is one of my favorite covers in the series, Conspiracy, where the knife is cutting through the cover. Also signed by Teixeira. In this case, he's basically drawn the same image of like a half face of Travis Morgan there. And in this series, this storyline basically, there's some people plotting against Warlord. He's, Tara is the queen of Shambhala. He's just the consort, right? So he doesn't, but he interferes a lot with stuff. And there's people that want to overthrow Tara. He's in the way. So basically, they end up imprisoning him and replacing him with a duplicate that looks and sounds just like him. And you can see that here in issue 57, where he's chained up, and you have the good and the evil Travis Morgans. And then here's another cover that I really dig with the playing cards that have the different characters on it. Now, we have the return of Tinder, and Tinder becomes really important in the storyline. He's grown up a little bit now. His adopted family was killed in issue 30. Now he's sort of a street urchin in Shambhala, and he ends up a very Dickensian sort of character. He ends up helping, we'll see on the next cover, Travis Morgan escape, even though they don't know each other. Another major character introduced by Sharon Grell during this run is this guy right here. Now, this guy is a bard, a poet, and a singer by the name of Graymore. He's a childhood friend of Tara's, and he shows up in this arc as an unexpected sort of love interest for Tara, because he's very opposite of Travis Morgan. Travis Morgan is incredibly manly and, passionate and physical and violent and, a fighter. And Graymore isn't any of those things other than passionate, because, of course, he's a poet. He's a romantic. He's an intellectual. He's very empathetic and very caring. And so Tara is really drawn to him, particularly because the evil Travis is messing things up in their relationship. And I think he's a great character. Now, as a kid, when I was reading it, obviously, I'm a Travis Morgan fan. I'm rooting for Travis Morgan. And I'm like, yeah. And Travis Morgan and Graymore do not get along at all, because, of course, they're both in love with the same woman. And so Travis is, he's the manly, he's the hero. And so you root for him. But as an adult, as a 49-year-old man, a little more mature, I'm definitely Team Graymore. Particularly, we'll get into this much later on, but Grell eventually comes back to Warlord decades later and does a very detailed deconstruction of Travis Morgan as a character and really lays bare all of his character flaws. And you can really see that in terms of having an actual partner, Graymore is a way, way better option than Travis Morgan across the board. So he shows up in this run, and remains a major character until issue 100. That's going to be a recurring theme. We're really going to get into that next video, but there's going to be a bunch of new major characters that are introduced over this period that become recurring important backup characters and supporting characters, and a lot of them are major characters until issue 100, because in issue 100 a large portion of the cast dies. But Graymore, really great character. It's a great contrast to Travis, because you can't really bring in another heroic swashbuckler to be a rival for him in terms of a romantic rival, because he's always going to be cooler, right? But with Graymore, you can see why she's interested in him, because he has all of the qualities that Travis Morgan does not have. And all the ways that Travis Morgan is completely failing in their relationship, Graymore is succeeding at. So he's a great character. And again, I'm Team Graymore. She would have been much better off with him. So 59, we have Tinder helping to save Travis Morgan. 60, we get the showdown between the two Travis Morgans. And I'll get to something you may have noticed on here in a second. And then 61, you have the end of the storyline. So this storyline runs for a while. It starts way back in issue 55 and runs through 61, so it's quite a long storyline. Part of that is that these are not full-size issues. They all still have backup stories, even though they're not like giant size. So the main stories are only going to be like 14, 15 pages, because Arion, the Lord of Atlantis, is the backup story now. Which I meant to mention earlier, when I was showing you the close-up of the drawing here in issue 55, what that's obscuring is a thing here saying, extra thrilling mystical adventure in prehistoric Atlantis. So this is actually the first appearance of Arion, Lord of Atlantis. Another minor key. Arion did go on to have his own series after this backup ended that lasted, and that ran for like 50 issues. So that's pretty good. So something to keep an eye out for in those dollar boxes. Because I think I mentioned this last time, there's millions of these in dollar boxes and 25-cent boxes, because at one point here in the early 80s, Warlord was actually, according to everything I've read, one of the top 3 or 4 selling comics at DC. And so there's a large number of them with very little interest in them now. And so they're very easy to find for cheap. 62, I told you we were going to be getting back to the werewolf storyline, and we get back into this here. It's just a really cool cover, really cool storylines. Grell's still just knocking out of the park with the covers, even though he's not working on the interiors anymore. 63, we get a new backup story. So they've had some success with these backup stories. We had Arion spin out into his own title. Omak lasted for quite a while. We got the first appearance of Arak, first appearance of Arion. This one is called Conquerors of the Barren Earth. This has a little bit of a soft spot for me, because when this backup story ended, it resolved with a 4-issue miniseries that happened to be coming out right when I started buying comics. So I bought that off the stands when it came out, with having never seen the backup story. And I don't remember anything about it other than just to have a soft spot for it. I hate to keep harping on how awesome these covers are, but they're so great. Here's Warlord coming through a magic mirror. You can see that it says else when. Basically goes back to a distant past for Skartaris, called a Wizard World, I think. And that is where we see some of the characters that were in that issue 35. The characters that were playing D&D. Turns out they're wizards from like thousands of years ago. Awesome cover. Another cool cover. We got anytime you get Shakira on the cover, it's cool, you know. Um, and this storyline with the werewolves and the wizards continues until here. 66 Wizard War. 67 actually continues past that, but 67, my favorite cover in the whole run. Again, it's another Grell. It's not even an action shot, it's just a pinup. But everything about this I just love. It's just the best. So it's just like cover after cover, each one better than the last. Absolutely fantastic. It's just tremendous. And here we're back to the werewolf storyline. You can see it's Mariah is involved in this. She's been around since back in issue 6 as a supporting character off and on. She's back. She's involved with the werewolf guy because he's from the Soviet Union. And then we get the storyline starting around here where it goes back to the surface world again. Issue 70. But this time when he goes to the surface world, he ends up in like a future Australia. So there's a little bit of a Mad Max vibe going on. Great cover, great Shakira cover. And then here's an important transition, because that 70 was the last of the Grell covers. Here's 71. Dan Jurgens taking over the cover art. Jurgens also is on interiors at this point, but is still crediting the writing to Mike Grell. But this is the last issue credited to Grell. It's the last issue written by Sharon Grell. Next issue, we're going to get Kerry Burkett taking over, and he's going to introduce more new characters, and a whole giant epic is going to start slowly building, and then immediately catching fire very quickly. Starting with issue 72, running through issue 100 is the next era of the book, because it's basically all one giant storyline with a few unexpected diversions in the middle, some very unexpected diversions in the middle. But it all basically forms one big storyline. So that's where we're going to pick up next time with issue 72. I should have been showing you the annuals as they were coming, because they do tie into the storylines. It's particularly evident in the next one. But as I mentioned, we've got that first era setting things up. We got the second era of the stuff with Joshua and Warlord's Grief. Then we have the era from issues 38 to 50, where we have basically a storyline about Demos's return to power. And then we have the Sharon Grell era from 52 to 71. But 72 to 100, a whole different thing, kind of standalone. And this is when I started reading comics. Warlord number 90, one of the first comics, literally one of the first 3 or 4 comics I ever bought. And so I'm really excited to get to these, because I love these issues. So next time around, we'll be talking about that Warlord 72 to 100. Let me know what you think of the comments down below. Let me know what you think about my claim that the Sharon Grell issues are actually better than the Mike Grell issues. Just let me know everything you think down below. I love this series of comics, and I do want to mention just real quick, I'll talk more about this next time, but I'm working on a fantasy comic. It'll be coming out later this year. It's called Quest, and Warlord's one of the big inspirations. All the sort of Bronze Age sort of fantasy comics, but particularly Warlord, one of the big inspirations, and Dungeons and Dragons is the other big inspiration. It's going to be like kind of like an adventuring party in Dungeons and Dragons. Everyone's got, have the different classes, the bard and the paladin and the healer and stuff like this. And there's going to be a lot of fighting monsters, hack and slash, swords and sorcery, dungeon crawling, looking for relics in the ruined temple, that sort of thing. So I'll talk more about that next time, but one of the reasons I was really inspired to get these Warlord issues out and talk about how much I love them is because I've been really inspired to work on this new fantasy comic, and I want to sort of share all this with you. I'm just really excited to be getting into the fantasy genre, because that's you know, since I was a little kid, has really been my favorite. And I'm really excited to get into that. So I'll talk more about Quest, and at some point I'll do a whole video where I can show you some of the artwork. I've got some of the variant covers done, and I've got most of the interior art done, and you can see the Warlord influence in it. But that's for later. For now, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.